Hi folks, you're with Tacitus today, Tacitus, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about statistics that I noticed from the Italian government, where they say that illegals arriving in Italy, now this could be the boats across the Mediterranean, or there's quite a lot of people that just arrive on, say, a tourist visa or something like that and overstay the visa. So, and the more people you get in Italy that are not Italian or that come from third world countries, the more people arrive supposedly to visit their relatives and then disappear into the ether, in the interior of Italy, and stay with their relatives or various other people from their African tribe and that sort of stuff. So they become invisible and they work in the underground economy. So what they're saying, though, is that considering, and I'm not precisely sure of the definitions they're using here, but that of all crimes in Italy, now 33%, or just over a third of them, are committed by illegals. Now, when you consider the population of illegals and the population of the whole Italian nation, then the illegals form a very small part, yet they commit 33% of all crimes in total, and more than 50% of all rapes and various other. When you put them together on the per 100,000, then they're so far ahead of all other population categories that it's insane. And when you're looking at a third of all the crimes in Italy are committed by 2% of the population, 1% of the population, it's hard to. Now, crossing the Mediterranean to Italy, it's alleged that around 3,000, give or take, of these people making this journey die or disappear or go missing. Now, when they go missing, I don't know what that means. Does that mean they've arrived in Italy, then disappeared into the interior or something? I don't know what that means. Does it mean they've all died? Does it mean a boat that set out never arrived, or one person from the boat did arrive but the rest drowned? I don't know exactly what that means. It's a bit vague. But looking at this, and I'm only spending a few minutes on it, already it came up that how the definition of what constitutes a refugee has changed. And it's changed radically over the last 10 to 15 years. So a refugee used to be a refugee, someone that was being persecuted by their government for, say, their religious beliefs or something like that, political beliefs, and therefore their life was impossible to live or in danger if they stayed where they were. So they could. They could say, well, I'm a refugee, and they could front up to the nearest safe country and get asylum or some sort of protection as a refugee. Now that's completely changed. That was the thing. And remember, these refugee laws were written and conceived during the time of the end of the Second World War, where there were many millions of people that were displaced by the war itself, national changes in borders and all sorts of things like that, that created many millions of refugees from all over Europe. It could be from Russia, Eastern Europe, Central Europe, all over the place, and these refugees were camped and looked after by the Red Cross and various charities of the day, and they were deemed in anyone's language as refugees. Now that's changed. So the definition of refugee that did exist, and the concept of refugees and the definition of refugees came in that post-World War II era, but it's been infected, and everything has today, with ideology. So refugees are seen very much in ideological terms. For example, if someone claims that they want to be transgender, and they can say, well, they live in a Muslim country, and so they have to leave because of persecution, and they have to only come to, instead of going to the nearest safe country, they'll just simply keep on going until they get to a nice, rich, white Western country and experience all the evil fascist Nazi racism that those countries supposedly apply. But the definition of refugees has broadened and broadened and broadened. So if somebody is going to have to do 6 months military service as part of their citizenship responsibility and obligation to their country and their fellow citizens, they can go, refugee, and off they go, because they don't want to do that. Someone can say, well, I've decided to become gay, so I'm now a refugee. So they can really self-identify as refugees. That's where it's at. Like, people can self-identify as I now want to be a cat, or I was born a boy, I now want to be a girl, and all that sort of thing. So there's a process of self-identification. So really anyone can come along and say, look, I'm a refugee. Now, it doesn't mean that all of them get approved, but the reject rate is between 2 and 3% for refugees. Many of those are entitled to free legal aid from activist NGOs, or even taxpayer-funded legal aid representatives from the country that they're trying to sort of freeload into. So majority of them win. So really the amount of refugee applications, and given they can self-identify and they get rid of their documents before they arrive, is maybe 1.2%, something like that, of these refugees fail. Now, again, given they can self-identify and that affect a independent assessment mechanism has been really dispensed with. So they can come into a rich Western country. They can pass through 10, 15 countries to get to the rich Western country, and that's now considered acceptable. But previously it wasn't. You had to go to the nearest safe country. There are various arguments of which countries have signed various conventions, and we're supposed to believe that illiterate black peasants from a village out in the middle of nowhere, or illiterate peasants from Bangladesh or Pakistan, somehow have an intimate understanding of international refugee and human rights law. That's clearly absurd. That's not the case. So we're looking at all these refugees and the high crime. I just want to actually come back to saying this destroying documents. Some people are perplexed by, so what, they destroy the documents? You get a name and you can get an ID, a photograph or this or that, or and then it can't be that hard. But in a third world country, it is. And I can speak from personal experience, having done a lot of travel around the world. Getting basic things done in a third world country is very hard. You need to have a very motivated network of contacts to help you. Otherwise, you've got no chance. So of getting basic things done. So this idea of if someone arrives and says their name is such and such, their name is Abdul or something like that, then from such and such a place, then you'd almost have no chance of verifying it. And the burden of proof rests with the state. Abdul can front up, someone can front up, say, my name's Abdul, I'm a refugee, and they've just destroyed the documents. And the burden of proof is on the state, or in the West, the way it's currently constructed, to prove that Abdul is not who he is, and to dispute. Now, that's almost impossible when you go through a third world country trying to verify that the mechanisms and the bureaucratic devices and the record keeping, things that we take for granted in the West, just don't exist in these places. Only the wealthiest, sort of best known people have really got if you like, a documented presence in society. Tens of millions, millions upon millions of peasants, they effectively don't exist, not in any sort of documented sense. And so, and there's too much interest, like in the rural villages. They want Abdul to be able to get to England or Australia or America, because then he can open the door to bring more of them over there. So they're prepared to tell any untruth. And their view is, look, if you white people are stupid enough to be exploited and tricked in this way, then that's your lookout. It's not our problem. And so they've got that attitude of, we're not doing anything wrong. If you're that easy to screw over, well, you're the bad person or the silly person or the idiot or whatever. So this is, excuse me, this is very much the thing here, that people who are criminals are being invited to leave. Their governments want them to leave. And are prepared to aid and abet and do what it is to get rid of people and just get rid of their surplus population generally. So quite a few of the people coming over are quite, apart from being gangs and, drug gangs, whatever the case may be, they're simply not genuine refugees or not refugees at all. They're insurgents in effect. And we're seeing this in Italy. Now, not all, I mean, you can look at areas, say in Britain, where there are crime stats for a certain area, but they don't break it down by race or religious grouping to the extent that you can really make use of some of these stats. So you can look at an area that's, say, mostly black and it's got a high recent immigrants or a high intake of illegals, and you can then see that the crime there is much higher than it is in an area that's all white, for example, or has hardly any illegals. But there are two issues here. These illegals come from war-torn, high crime rate countries, and where murder rates and so on are off the charts. They then arrive in a Western country, and they've got no concept of they've looked at Western TV programs, for example. They've looked at the hot blonde chicks wearing next to no clothes on a summer's day, and to them that lack of modesty it can only mean one thing: prostitution. That's all it can. It can't mean anything else. And so they behave rather strangely when they get to these Western countries, and there's no intensive induction program on how to behave or anything like that. So even if they are generally well-intentioned people, they could easily run off the rails. But coming back to the crime stats here, wherever you see these people in large numbers, the crimes increase. And either there must be a much more determined induction program for them if this is to continue, or the refugee definitions have to tighten up very considerably, or the whole idea of refugees moving around has to be abandoned. This idea that they're just desperate people wanting a better life, that's bullshit. It's just pure globalist propaganda. And similarly, the mechanisms by which these people are able to move around the world are all globalist NGO funded. These people couldn't make those journeys without all this help of food and clothing and water and shelter. They can only dream of making those sort of journeys. So that their whole journey is funded by the same globalists that have the propaganda machine screaming in support of it. But the crimes that are committed, what can be done about these crimes? The view now is if the Western countries take determined action against these people, they'll be accused of being racists or Nazis or something like that. So really nothing's being done. Everything is now in the too hard basket, while the lies and the untruths and the propaganda and the freeloading continue. You've been with Tacitus today at your Pushback channel. Thank you for listening.